Baby shark, baby shark, baby shark, baby shark, mommy shark, mommy shark, mommy shark, mommy shark, daddy shark.
And welcome back to the show this morning. I'm your host, Lance Roberts. Michael Lebowitz, CFA, joining us live from his bunker up in Maryland, where everybody's kind of everybody's trying to survive everybody's trying to survive the fallout now. This is it's funny, for years there's been all these video games and movies out about the fallout, the zombie nation, all this, and it's almost funny now we're to that point because everybody's just like bunkered down in their house.
Right.
How's the Nationals playing out so far?
They won last night. It's weird. I've been watching a couple games and there's no fans, but they pipe in noise. And if you're not paying attention, so if I'm looking down at my phone, the noise isn't always commensurate with what's going on in a game. So you're like, how did I miss that double? The noise, the fans didn't even do anything.
I think what they should do is to make the games more interesting now is like put pictures of famous people up in the audience, like over the back fence, right? So you have like a picture of Trump, maybe Nancy Pelosi, Trey Gowdy, whoever, maybe movie stars, put Kim Kardashian. So when they hit one of the dingers, right? If they hit one of the silhouettes, it counts as 2 runs. So, make it interesting.
Yeah.
Let's make it interesting,
Right.
But let's see how good these guys are, right? So,
Because it's not enough of a soap opera already.
yeah, I know, right?
Lance, so they're playing Toronto.
Right.
Toronto's not allowed to play in Canada. So Toronto has to play their home games in the U.S. And I think there's a problem.
Wait, stop. Of course Toronto's not allowed to play in Canada, right?
So I think they're working on a more permanent home stadium in Buffalo or some other city.
Yeah.
But the series with the Nationals is actually occurring in Washington. So Washington is playing an away game in their home stadium. So I was watching last night and trying to figure out how the noise would be piped in.
Right.
Is it if Toronto did well, would the noise be higher than if the Nationals did well?
Sure.
And couldn't figure anything out.
But
Or
would it have or would the noise have a slight French accent? Would be the case.
Right. Look, this is 2020.
Anything is possible.
Le roar.
Exactly. Le roar. So, what's the latest on the Redskins now with the whole name change thing?
Well, they're called the Washington Football Team now.
That's the best they could come up with.
No, here's the problem, and it makes sense. There's a ton of Lance. You know this from what we've done. You can't get a .com name, and then you got all the copywriting and trademarking and all that stuff. So they didn't feel like they could rush it and get it in time for the new season.
Right.
So going with the Washington Football Team. So go team.
Go team.
And I think by next season they'll be the Washington whatevers.
This is the Washington. Yeah, see the Washington whatevers. Just perfect. Jeez, it's just getting
if you're on this current projection on where things stand, right. I'm concerned that Washington is not going to be a valid name anymore because Washington owns slaves, and they're gonna.
Yeah, that's trust me, that's very.
Indeed, to Washington, so we'll see what they do.
You just may wind up being the whatevers.
The whatever, and I'm fine with that because they play like the whatevers.
So, all right, well, talk about another piece of absurdity here real quick. Kodak, Eastman Kodak, was a company that was trading roughly at $2 a share. They actually do make products. They make some printers. They make printer ink. They do make digital cameras. Eastman Kodak was famous for their 35 millimeter film and all the stuff that they used to make back in the day. That isn't needed anymore now that everybody uses their phones to take pictures. But over the last couple of days, the stock's gotten a big boost. And my question is who knew what when in Congress? Because some option traders made a killing on this because there was a big spike in call options on Eastman Kodak before the president announced that he would invoke the National Defense Act to get Kodak to make products for fighting the coronavirus. In the last 3 days, the stock went from $2 to $50 a share yesterday. It's been a huge windfall. If anybody happened to be long $2 share Kodak, which I'm not sure why anybody would, but whoever had it did very well here. But, this is kind of an interesting thing. All this is the government gave them a grant, basically, that ultimately is to make some product. But once they make this product, what's going to is Kodak going to go back to doing, right?
Well,
what they were doing before.
So I'm under the impression that Kodak, so one of the big issues that this country faces is that something like 75 to 80% of our critical drugs, however that's defined, are made in China.
Right.
That's a huge problem. You want to make your own critical drugs, and you especially don't want to leave it up to I don't know if they're an enemy, but they're not one of our best friends, right?
Right.
So I guess the president decided Kodak, famous for their film and cameras, who actually, I read this yesterday, and I don't remember the name, but they bought a pharmaceutical years ago for a huge amount of money and basically broke it up and sold it for nothing. They basically got fleeced in the pharmaceutical business.
Can't imagine how that would happen.
Kodak is apparently the right company for this.
Yes.
Instead of putting it out for the bid or going to a company that actually makes drugs and knows how to make drugs, Kodak's the one. So it got leaked, right? You could tell by the trading. It went from, like you said, it was like this range between $1.50 and $3, and it hit almost 50 yesterday.
Well, and again, this is very similar to all the congressmen that went out and bought work at home stocks before the announcement of the shutdown in the economy. Who would have known? That's the big question. It's not saying that insider trading doesn't happen in the White House or the Congress, right? It does, right? We are very aware of this. But the interesting thing though is that I guess now that they're getting, you're converting Eastman Kodak into the next big pharmaceutical giant. The next step, this was a tweet that was out yesterday that Cole was telling me about. The next step is going to be, basically they should start building rockets to Mars and electric cars. So
right. I mean, this is
and solar panels. I mean, that's all next, right?
No, but in all seriousness, Lance, we talk about zombification, right? Where these companies that should be out of business are not let to go, and those resources can't be spent on more productive, more inventive, better companies, right? This is happening all over again, where instead of putting it with a company that's really good at innovation that could use some help, that has a future, it's with basically a Hertz, Chesapeake Energy, and we're seeing the same ridiculous behavior in the stock that we saw with those companies. Who knows how it ends, but it's not good for the economy.
Well, talking about zombie companies, Congress is now floating around an idea of another $500 billion bailout of the CMBS bond market. Real quick here, we got about 4 minutes to the break. What is CMBS, and why is Congress talking about bailing it out?
So just like the mortgage-backed security market, where they take a bunch of mortgages, they put it into a security, someone guarantees that security, the mortgages, and then they sell it as one. So if you buy a mortgage-backed security, you're really buying the loans on 10,000 houses. So you have geographic diversification, house diversification. You really get a broad swath of an economy. Different types of borrowers, et cetera. This is the same thing, but for commercial properties. So instead of just buying one office building in Spokane, Washington, you're getting 100 office buildings or 100 restaurants or 100 commercial type properties scattered across the U.S.
So basically what Congress is doing here is they want to bail out the commercial real estate market where people have not been able, businesses, tenants, et cetera, aren't paying their rent because of where we are in the economy. So these bondholders are about to go into default in a lot of cases because, people aren't paying the rent and aren't paying their mortgages, their commercial, mortgages, so to speak. And so now we're talking about putting together another bailout here for the commercial side of the market. But again, this goes back to what you were saying a second ago. We're basically creating zombie companies that had gotten overextended, over-leveraged, et cetera, building these properties, et cetera, and now they can't survive, missing some payments.
But Lance, they're not bailing out that office building going out of business or the company that owns the office building going out of business. They're bailing out the investors that own those properties.
That's right.
Right. This is the same story over and over again. They're bailing out investors. Investors that took risk knowingly, that got paid a lot more than buying quote unquote risk-free treasuries, got paid a lot more. And now, things like this happen. We do have recessions, and that's why you get paid more to take that risk. And now they're getting bailed out too, just like junk bond holders and everyone else.
Well, let's be honest. We're bailing out pension funds that own them. We're bailing out Wall Street that owns them. We're bailing out everybody else that owns them. And what's interesting, though, is it really doesn't solve the problem, because the $500 billion is going in as a preferred stock position, which is junior to the actual debt position. So not only when ultimately these bonds default anyway, now, not only do the bonds default anyway, but now the taxpayers are on the hook because they're junior to the debt holders. They lose everything. So this bailout ultimately goes to zero and is all on the back of taxpayers. And again, all we did was was bailing out Wall Street, who knew what they were getting into to begin with. So
right. And commercial property has many problems.
Exactly. Come back. We'll get into the Federal Reserve yesterday. Jerome Powell up on the Hill talking about the latest Fed policy action. No surprise, didn't raise rates. Of course, he's never going to raise rates ever again. We'll talk about that when we come back in just a moment with Michael Lebowitz, CFA. Don't go away.
Got questions for Lance later? Ask now at realinvestmentadvice.com.